உலகெங்கும் தமிழரின் பிம்பம் உங்கள் டிவி.
Welcome to CrossRoads on TVI. I'm your host, Parthi Kandaval. Today we have the wonderful opportunity to speak with our Premier, the Premier of Ontario, Ms. Kathleen Wynne. Good afternoon, Kathleen.
Good afternoon.
Thank you
nice
for...
to see you.
Yeah.
And I should say, wanna come?
Well, that's right. Wanna come, yeah. Thank you for hosting us.
Pleasure. Thanks for being here.
Oh, it's our pleasure as well. And this office 1 year ago was held by Mr. Dalton McGuinty, our former Premier. A person, I guess, or leader who many will say is very different and distinct from your leadership style. You seem to prefer consultations that create conversations, as you called them, which is distinct from the previous leadership style. And why do you feel that's your hallmark, and why is that approach important to you?
Well, it's always been the way I have been in public life, and quite frankly, before I was in elected office. I really believe that bringing people together and defining a problem and then brainstorming a solution and coming up with the plan is the way we make good policy. And so I bring that to the job. It's just how I function. And I think that in politics, it's very important that we stay in touch with the people we represent, the people who know the issues firsthand. And so that's why I function in that way.
Some will argue that, you're the leader. You've got to take your decisions and see them through. Do you find that necessary at times, especially going into the new year with the budget coming up?
Absolutely. And, just because we have discussions and we talk about solutions doesn't mean at the end of the day the leader doesn't have to take a decision, because that is the case. The leader does have to. We have to work to find consensus, but if we can't do that, then there has to be a decision made. So I'm not afraid to take decisions, and we've made a lot of progress over the last year. When I came into office, there were no extracurriculars in the schools. The legislature had been prorogued. We brought back the legislature. We got into the budget process. We got a budget passed. So I'm very pleased with the progress that we've made. But I also think it's important to listen to people.
On the topic of education, an issue that's close to many in our community, the TDSB is in the news again, particularly in light of $1 million of raises for some senior staff. In this climate, and also given concerns of the governance of boards, not just the TDSB, do you believe there's a need, and given it's a minority climate, for a strategic review on education? I think that school boards have a responsibility, and I was a public school trustee, and school boards have a responsibility to follow the rules and to spend the public dollars wisely. The Ministry of Education in this case is working with the board to make sure that those situations are rectified, because there were decisions made that shouldn't have been made in my understanding. So I think that it's very important that we have those rules in place, and that those rules be followed, and that we monitor it. In terms of a review of education, the Minister Sandals right now is doing a consultation on education for the 21st century. She's actually getting input on just that. What should our education look like? How do we move to a more excellent system? And my hope is that we'll be able to bring forward some improvements in the math curriculum and some things that will really push us to the next level. Again, on education, recently a Mississauga Catholic high school banned or barred the creation of a gay-straight alliance, which many found to be, in violation of our values and our spirit of Ontario and as Canadians. And given, the feeling that many communities feel that the funding of a religious school system is not in line with the future of Ontario and the future of education,
Given these questions, whether it's finance, governance, or school systems, is a meaningful review only possible in a majority climate, or are these questions?
We're not planning at this point to revisit the constitutional makeup of the education system. In that situation, I agree with you, it was unacceptable. That again, that school board needs to follow the rules, and the law is that kids are able to form groups that are inclusive, and if they want to call them a gay-straight alliance, they can call it a gay-straight alliance. So those are the rules, and boards need to follow the rules. In terms of the structure of the education system, as you know, it is constitutional, and we've had many discussions in this province about the history of education. I think that what's most important now is that we work to make sure boards are working together, that they are including all students, and that they are working as hard as possible to make sure that every student can achieve.
On transit, and particularly in regard to the Scarborough transit decision, many of our viewers reside in Scarborough or access Scarborough, and there's a lot of debate, rightfully so, on the two options that were available between the subway and the LRT extension. Transit experts conclude that the LRT option would have served more people and provided greater accessibility. However, your government went with the decision for a subway extension, which would, at best, 3 stops. Do you feel the discussion or the consultation on the LRT review was not perhaps given much discourse, because many in Scarborough will argue, or some will argue, that the subway was seen as a guaranteed thing, where the area, the region, or the eastern part of Toronto saw a lot of decisions going back and forth on that issue, and some may have falsely concluded that it was prematurely decided upon because of it was a certain.
So we had a certain amount of money that we had to put into that line, and the LRT was the plan. But we also said that if there was money that was forthcoming from the federal government, or if the city council decided that they wanted to raise more funds in order to change that we understood that there was a lot of resistance to that original plan, and so we worked with the city council, and it's always a balancing act in terms of making these political decisions. This decision had a lot of history, as you know, a lot of history in Scarborough about what the expectations of people in Scarborough were, and our Scarborough members were clear that they felt that this was a decision that if it could be revisited, it should be revisited. We need to build more transit in this region. We need to build more transit for people in Scarborough, Etobicoke, North York, City of Toronto, Durham, York region, Brampton, Mississauga, all over this region, we need more transit to be built. So I'm determined, Parthy, to continue to build transit, and we will, from time to time, we will have these discussions about which line and how, but basically we are determined to implement the big move and get the region moving the way it should be. We've been investing in transit since 2003, and we need to continue going forward.
On that issue, recently you articulated that you're willing to go to the polls if an election's called next spring on the issue of a tax, an increase in tax, in a climate where, fortunately, unfortunately, the discourse of tax increase is seen as very politically unpopular. Are you?
So I'm willing to, I'm willing to go into an election on the platform of building more transit, building more infrastructure. There's a huge benefit to building infrastructure in the short term, the creation of jobs, and there's a huge benefit in the long term in that you have that asset. And in the Greater Toronto Hamilton area, that's transit that's very much needed. So yeah, I'm willing to go to an election on that premise that we need more transit, and we're the leanest government in the country. We have made a lot of cuts in ministries, and we have constrained expenses. We've constrained wage increases over the last number of years. So there isn't fat to cut out of the system. You know, when some of my opposition colleagues say, well, we just cut and then you know, we can do everything we want to do. That's not realistic. That's not a real plan. That's just an illusion, because the fact is that what that cutting would mean is taking tens of thousands of people out of education and healthcare. And that's not what I believe is needed in the province right now. We need those services to be stable, and we need to make those investments in people and in infrastructure and in a strong business climate.
On that topic or climate of the economy, recently the government of Ontario announced a partnership with Cisco to create
1,700 jobs, 1,700 and ultimately 5,000 jobs.
And given the problems we've seen in the manufacturing sector, including the closure of Heinz and Kellogg's, is this the future of job creation in Ontario, or even Canada for that matter, of public-private partnerships? And are there any concerns with the precedent it's creating?
So, you know, we have had for years in this province, but particularly in the last few years, we've had relationships with companies like with Ford, for example, where we're putting $70 million into Ford so that they can upgrade their technology and they can compete globally. The investment with Cisco is so that they can bring in those new jobs, have the technology and the capacity to compete globally. So those relationships, those investments are really by way of being a catalyst. You know, government as a catalyst for companies being able to expand and bring in jobs. So I would say it's less a public-private partnership than it is a facilitation of business coming to the province. The reason Cisco is here, and the president of the company said, you know, they're here because of our strong workforce. They're here because of our stable financial system, and we were competing. Ontario was competing with other jurisdictions that had more money on the table. So, you know, we actually have to compete with those other jurisdictions in order to bring business to the province, and we will continue to do that to all regions of the province.
Something I've noticed at your inauguration is your inclusivity with regards to our First Nations, including them in your introduction and including a dance or performance by them as part of the inauguration ceremony. And beyond that, consistently you've incorporated them in your speeches and references. To new communities in Ontario and Canada. Why is that important, the inclusion of our First Nations?
Well, I don't think that we can call ourselves a truly pluralistic or inclusive society unless we include everyone. And I would suggest, and this is the history of this country, that every one of us, your family, my family, we all came here from somewhere else, except for our Aboriginal people. And so if we ignore that part of our diversity, and if we ignore our history, which I would suggest we have done for many years, then I think that our claim to be an inclusive province and an inclusive country is not real. And so I am determined that I will continue to raise the profile of First Nations and Aboriginal people, so First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people, because I think we need to tell each other our history in a more honest way.
And on that topic, recently you met with Prime Minister Stephen Harper to discuss the Ring of Fire developments. Yes. How did that meeting go? And is there something concrete in play? I mean, there's a question mark of $50 billion in terms of economic activity. What is the progress on it, and when can we start seeing development?
So there are a number of companies that are interested in working with the government to develop the Ring of Fire. There are First Nations communities with whom we're working right now to make sure that they are part of that economic development. That takes some time, and we've been working for some months to make sure that there are the training opportunities there, because if we want young Aboriginal people to be able to take part, we have to make sure that there are training opportunities for them. But the most significant thing that we're doing on the business side right now is setting up a development corporation that we hope will bring a number of parties to the table. So that will bring First Nations people, will bring companies, will bring the federal government, we hope, and we will be at the table so that we can make some decisions about how we're going to build the infrastructure that's needed. Because to develop this resource in the north, there has to be infrastructure in place. And so I'm very optimistic about it. My meeting with Stephen Harper went well. He and his ministers have sung the praises of the Ring of Fire and have been very positive about the opportunity. I think now it's time that they need to come to the table and work with us to make sure that the infrastructure gets built so we can develop this. And he was open to considering being part of the development corporation. So we'll stay in touch.
Thank you, Kathleen. And it's the beginning of the holidays, the season's holidays.
Yes.
And what are your thoughts during this time of the year, and your thoughts on the new year?
Well, this is a dark. In terms of this climate, it's a dark time of year, and what this holiday season gives us is a bit of light and warmth in that the cold and the darkness. And so, what I hope is that everyone can enjoy the holiday. Some people will be celebrating Christmas, others will not, but there are many celebrations in our community that that people can take part in, and I'm very, very hopeful that everyone will have a happy holiday.
Thank you,
and
Premier.
a Happy New Year.
Oh, that's right. Thank you, Premier Wynne. Dear viewers, it's been our pleasure to speaking with Premier Wynne for our year-end interview.
And let me see if I get this right. Is it Nandri Vanakam?
Exactly.
Nandri Vanakam.
Nandri Vanakam. Welcome back to Crossroads on TVI. Good afternoon, dear viewers. We hope you and your loved ones are keeping well and enjoying the holidays. We hoped you enjoyed our interview with the Premier of Ontario, Ms. Kathleen Wynne. There's great likelihood that we'll be seeing a provincial election in the coming spring of 2014. So we hope that interview gave a better understanding of the questions and issues facing our province. We will also have interviews with the Ontario NDP leader, Andrea Horwath, and opposition leader, Tim Hudak. On today's show, we'll be discussing the nature of the Christmas holiday and the New Year. Oftentimes, for those who celebrate, the mix of shopping and holiday parties distract us from the true meaning and purpose behind Christmas, Jesus Christ's birth and message. Also, in the next few days, many of us will be taking stock of 2013 and how it treated us, resulting in perhaps taking a couple of New Year's resolutions. To discuss these issues, we are joined with Pastor Kesavan Balasingham, a pastor at the Living Church of the Savior, Aristo Aryaratnam, and Samuel Tharmaratnam. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for having us. And one thing that struck me this holiday season, and a few people I noticed comment, is that they felt the spirit of the season's a bit different this year. And is there any truth to that, or in the recent years that there's been a change?
Well, personally, I've found that when I was a child growing up, Christmas was very different. Like, you'd wake up, you wouldn't have to go to school. You'd have all these gifts waiting for you in the Christmas tree and everything. And now as an adult, you fight for Boxing Day, like parking spots and trying to find the best deal, or going to LCBO to stock up. So it's a complete different change. Like, it's also a lull from work. I find that when you were a kid, all you cared about was playing video games and drinking hot cocoa or going tobogganing until you fell asleep or you're tired. And now it's more about going out and seeing friends, family, and enjoying the holiday, and also getting a break, a well-needed break from work. So
I think with the situation that happened in Toronto with the weather, that sort of put a damper on the whole Christmas spirit and things like that. People were too busy trying to, get the heat going or trying to find a place to stay. So that kind of ruined holidays a little bit. But on the flip side, I think it brought people together. So like you said, the shopping and all this, that does take a little bit away from the holiday spirit and, you know, what the real reason Christmas is. But all in all, I think it brought families closer this year, the ones that had to struggle.
I think also when we look at what's been dominating our agenda leading into November and December, and like comments made, like shopping sometimes, but this year obviously the storm and the power outage put a big hamper in it. But I think even for the first time in many years, I realized we had this Black Friday thing happening also. So shopping for many people dominated this, and but I think being intentional about understanding what Christmas is and remembering what it is, and celebrating it as a family in tradition at home or even in church. And I think when you see that sliding away, to take time off, to sit down and to reflect and to remember the reason for Jesus is massively important. Otherwise, I think we'll slowly drift away.
And why do you think that focus has gone away from Jesus' life and into, say, the commercial aspects of shopping?
Because the corporate worlds have much more marketing for their products and their stores or whatever the incentives they have, versus Christianity or Catholicism, whatever. There's not much marketing going on, and people are thinking Christmas, all they think is gifts. And kids are brought up to think, they're not thinking about what the real reason is. Most of the kids have no clue what's going on.
Do you feel that was the same when, we're all more or less kind of the same generation? Was it the same back then as it is now?
Well, 20 years ago, for example, I remember on a Sunday morning, malls were closed. Sometime in the early 90s, and very few cars on a Sunday morning. And during holidays, right? So now Sunday morning is busy in the mall like a Saturday. So you really, if you didn't live at that time, you're born afterwards, you don't even know what that feels like. On a Sunday morning, you get up and you have time with your family, or you attend church together. Now there's more things pulling you. Right, and so that makes it more difficult.
How have you felt as a kid?
Just to agree with that, so when I was much younger, every Christmas I'd be at church, and like for every occasion I'd be at church. And then I found that as I grew older and the people I spent my time with, I would tend to do what they did. So as I spent less time with my family and more time with friends, a lot less of my friends would go to church. So as a result, I went to church a lot less, and eventually got to the point where I stopped going to church altogether unless my parents asked me to come with them. So that is something that I've come across.
And have you felt a difference?
Yeah, it's like,
or do you feel
even in my late teenage years, like I used to go to midnight mass every year. I'm Catholic, so midnight mass was a big ritual with the family. And then I eventually even got friends who weren't even Catholic to come with me to midnight mass, because we don't do gifts till midnight mass is over. So but now it seems like midnight mass is sort of pulled away, because either you're really exhausted and you got kids, however the family lifestyle is, and then you don't get to it as much as you want. And the next day when you wake up, you either wake up too late, or there's always something going on instead of the priority where it used to be the church.
Pastor, as a leader in your community, how do you reconcile the commercialization, the rampant gift buying that comes with that, and some will argue the selfishness of the desires of gifts, with Christ's message of sacrifice and doing with what we need as opposed to what we want, right?
The calling in the way of Christ goes literally against the grain of our culture of gift buying and storing up, because he says we store up treasures that'll rust. But he says, build up for your treasures that's in heaven. And when Jesus came, the angels, the night before he was born, the angels came to the shepherds and says, behold, we have news of great joy for all people. And that ultimately came to fruition in the most quoted verse of the Bible, John 3:16, for God so loved the world. And so the object of God's love is the world. And Jesus came to pay the sacrifice. And so, and God warns us that if we are so consumed by things and money, and he says, whatever is most important, whatever we treasure in our heart, that becomes our object of worship even. And so Jesus says, so test your heart. What's important to you? So if I feel like if I don't have these gifts, the iPad or the phones or the computer or the car, do I feel as though my life has less value, right? And so what I encourage our people to examine ourselves regularly, not just in New Year's or Christmas time, is to say, do we have gratitude in our hearts for the gift of Christ? Because he gives us a gift that's eternal, that no one can take away, that will never perish or rust away, right? And so what I find often, even in my own life, I have to ask the question, Lord, is gratitude missing right now? Because when my life is not marked with gratitude, I don't give thanks to God. And if I don't give thanks to God, I won't be giving time to Him either. And I won't reflect on Him. Right?
Aristo, you're a young father, and growing up in your faith and now as a father, how do you balance that, the teaching of those values and the kid's natural desire and probably because of society
it is a tough balance. Considering also my mom was Hindu, I was Catholic, so my mom still followed the Christian. Now I'm my new wife. I'm married to a wife who's Punjabi, not new wife, right? So it's a different culture, and she tries to do as much as the holiday spirit is, mostly buying gifts, setting up the tree, inviting people for dinner. So we try to do the family aspect of it, but really the religious aspect has been lost.
Do you find you have to limit the number of gifts to give your kids?
I tried. This Christmas, I bought them each tents because I fight for gifts, and every gift they got to put in their tent, and the tents were full.
Oh gosh!
And the point where this morning I even moved boxes that were not even open into the basement because they didn't even get through them all.
And do you feel that there's something lost when?
Yeah, it's all just gifts, and I'm this year is one of my resolutions. We'll talk about later, I guess. Is to get them sort of back into the religion, go to church. Like they pray at night, but do they really know? They're young, 3 and 5, right? So this is the time I got to get them into it more. So it is a tough sell to the culturally, society-wise, and even what they expect as kids right now. All they see is gift. Christmas is gifts, So they understand there's a baby Jesus, but it's still gifts.
Sam, and in your generation, do you feel that connection to a spiritual message is totally disconnected, or?
Yeah, I definitely feel that way. Like when I talk to anyone, I ask them what they're doing on Christmas Eve. No one talks about going to church. Everyone talks about, can't wait to see what my boyfriend or girlfriend got me tomorrow.
But beyond going to church, do you see any sort of critical reflection on, there's some bit of a movement that go, I'm not going to do shopping because I want to avoid the malls, I want to avoid the thing and the need to buy gifts. Do you see any amongst your peers?
Not really. What I do see is like some of Jesus' messaging, which is like teaching us about forgiveness, love, like family. Like I see that. Like Christmas is definitely a time where people get together with people that they don't really get to time to spend with usually, right? So like family. Like I found myself. I recently moved to Toronto, and I spent my Christmas Eve with my parents. So I came back for the 2 days to spend with them because I didn't see them like in a few weeks. So like that's what I find that. In my generation, it's still a lot about gifts, but it's still a lot about family too. And while we do not think about God at all times, like we should, like I feel like, Jesus' message partially is still there.
Pastor, beyond the connection with the church and the Bible, some will seek to practice the Christmas spirit through service. And what's the connection between the less fortunate at this during the holidays and our own practice of the Christmas spirit?
I mean, a wonderful place where Jesus says, for the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom. And Jesus washes the feet of his disciples, and nobody doubted who the leader was. But when he says, if I'm willing to go down and serve, our life has to be marked not just with gratitude, but service. But here's the thing, service in itself, without the gift behind it, ultimately still leaves us longing. And so I think the challenge for those who follow Christ is to say we are full of gratitude because of what he has done for us, not just on Christmas but on Good Friday and Resurrection Sunday, and we go and do service into the community, and through those service we model the love of Christ, and so that people in themselves will ask, why are you doing this? Because ultimately Jesus did it for me and he laid his life down for me. Just one of the questions you asked earlier, how do we remember? One thing we do with our nieces and nephews is we ask them, sit in a circle on Christmas Day, and we say, what is one thing you can give thanks for? And just as young people, I have 2 kids, a toddler and an infant, and they're not ready yet, but with our nieces and nephews we do that. And they go around the circle and just get them to think about, what are you one thing thankful to God for? And get them to think that way every year and throughout the year so that they can give thanks regularly.
Do you guys see that in amongst your peers, that people have time to do service, to the less fortunate to be involved?
There's a few side of my friends who do the service thing. Every Christmas they're downtown doing something or helping at one of the kitchens. but I noticed that group is getting smaller and smaller as the years pass by. It almost seems like no one has time anymore. That people are chasing to have time for themselves. That there's no time to even give. That's no excuse, but it just seems like it's just so limited time.
Sam, one thing just to change direction a little bit, during this time, the holiday time, some people say, there's always the usual debate, is it Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays? What are your thoughts on that question?
If someone, I love to say Merry Christmas to everyone. However, I don't say it first. If someone says Merry Christmas to me, I'll say it back. But if I'm unsure if they are welcoming of Christmas, I'll say Happy Holidays.
Okay.
Because I just don't want to risk offending anyone. And I know that, there'll always be the 1 in 100 person who would be offended, and I don't want to take that chance. So I think it's rather be safe than sorry.
Everybody gets Merry Christmas from me.
In modern times, so many people choose to put up the Christmas tree. What's the symbolism behind the Christmas tree and the story behind it?
It started so many years ago. There is no real biblical foundation for that. People do it as a means to celebrate. If symbols in our lives don't point us to Christ ultimately, they're just there. Sometimes they can become a distraction. I'm not saying don't have one, but I'm saying if you have the Christmas tree, still let it be a conversation around it of why do we have the Christmas tree, and what does this cause us to look forward to the coming of Christ, the decorations, the gifts. The 3 kings went and gave gifts to Christ, right? So I would use that, because otherwise it would just become a secular thing and Christ would be devoid of it.
And do you feel, if you had peers who, I grew up without a Christmas tree, right? And I think due to the presence and the exposure of Christmas during this time, a few times my brother and I, we'd ask for a Christmas tree, but eventually we got over it. But do you feel that there's a burden placed on communities that don't have a Christian faith in their home to provide something for their kids?
Definitely. I know parents are, he's very atheist and he doesn't believe in it. And when I went to his house for dinner, he had a Christmas tree. I said, "Hey, what's this?" And he said, so the kids are used to this, and they're little kids, they're the same age as mine. They asked for a tree, and he's like, "Okay." He goes, "There's nothing religious on it." For him, it's just a tree with lights. But I just thinking about it, I'm like, next year my tree, I'm going to have a manger on the bottom, a star will be on the top, so it sort of indicates that's the star, and I'll have the 3 kings. At least put a message around the tree instead of just a tree with gifts. So it's been taken away. A lot of people do it just because it's a thing to do.
But do you think there is an overexposure in our society where it places a burden on families, non-Christian families, to practice it?
I definitely agree. So, I can imagine myself, if I had kids, I would imagine when they go to school, that's what everyone talks about during December. So, I can't wait for Christmas. Do you have your tree up? Even when I'm at work, I hear my coworkers talking about, I put my tree up last week. Have you put your tree up yet? So and the thing is, they just make the assumption that you celebrate that, and if you don't take part in it, you don't feel part of the group, right? So,
let's be honest, it's the biggest celebration in the year, right? For everybody.
Some will argue that we're supposedly a secular country, right? Should we give a place of preference for any faith?
Well,
even if it's societal.
You know what? Nobody is going to be forced. Even Jesus himself says, if you want to follow me, deny yourself, take up the cross and follow me. He never forced anybody. So people are given the message and the choice to follow. Whether it's when I was growing up, and none of us in our homes were Christians at that point, and we had tree, we had presents. I think part of it is just the culture of shopping, of Christmas, and we gave the gifts. And never a single moment did we think of Jesus or did we talk of him, right? And so, but nobody forced us and nobody came and told us anything. We just sort of adapted to that culture, even though we moved here and we grew up as a Hindu family at that point.
Like the season that's given, I think it's lost the religious aspect of it so much. It's strictly about just the holidays, time off. You get some break during the December month. You get to see family. You get to eat a lot. You get to get gifts.
Do you feel there's pressure for people in the private or public sector to buy gifts for their colleagues or their superiors?
like in the business I'm in, like I know a lot of people went around all year and like spent $20,000-$30,000 on gifts to give to clients, to give to you know, people they work with. So it and what was the reason behind it? You know what I mean? So it's just been, you know, they expect something at this time of year, a gift.
And in the private sector,
I definitely agree. Like people at my work had even asked me, "Oh, well, what is your boss?" And like I had got my boss something, but they had assumed that you have to do it because like I guess it's considered a norm to get your superior a gift.
Or teachers or whatever, you know. I had to buy off 6 teachers gifts. I'm like,
our school told them not to. But it's time for a short break. When we come back, we'll discuss the role of Santa and other questions around Christmas and the New Year's. Please join us after these short announcements. Welcome back, dear viewers. Please join our conversation at any time at 416-623-8100. We'd love to hear your questions or comments. You know, this time also involves a lot of parents and teaching their children about this figure, Santa Claus. Some will argue that, you know, it's unnecessary. What are your thoughts on that question of Santa? How did you, as a father, perhaps?
Last year it came down, so we had a party at the house, and I dressed up as Santa. It came down, and they all pointed at me and said, "You're not Santa Claus, you're brown." I said, "Okay." So I think now with my kids' age, they recognize Santa. Like we went to the mall, lined up for an hour and a half to take a picture with Santa. We went to a different mall. He saw Santa again. He's like, "How come the Santa's in different places?" So they're trying to question things too, right? So. I'm not sure the role of Santa originally, when it was originally Santa, Saint Nick back in the day, he gave to the needy. Now it just seems like Santa's giving to everybody, good or not, they're still getting gifts. So it's become part of our culture, Santa. Every kid knows about it. Every culture knows about Santa, and most cultures even following Santa.
Sammy, do you think having, you know, Aristo's kid said, "Santa, you can't be Santa, he's white." Are we creating a problem in that type of thinking when young brown or Tamil kids think that Santa Claus can only be white?
I'm not sure if it's a problem. It's just like something you grow up with. Like it's something that if you see and you get an actual picture because it's portrayed so much in the media. So if you see Santa Claus as, you know, wearing red clothes, white beard, and he's white, then you assume that every Santa's supposed to be white, right?
But could we critically reflect on that?
I think we could. Like I think that.
But do you think our media allows that? They provide opportunities, or?
I don't think so, because like even if you look at all the movies like Home Alone, like when the Christmas season goes on, you get like Home Alone 1, Home Alone 2, you get, you know, a beautiful life.
Every movie Santa's, you know, they're not colored, and if he is colored, it's the comedy ones. They're making fun of Santa, where Santa's the bad guy, the colored guy is colored. Santa is the bad Santa, right? So
it's interesting. From a faith perspective, is there any value in having what's now the conventional understanding of Santa?
I think for example, what Arista said about Saint Nicholas and giving to the needy as a virtuous thing to do. I think when you sing the song, you know, Santa Claus is coming, and whether you've been, you know, good or bad, right? You got to be on the good books. I think in the faith, what Christ says is that if we try to be good on our own, and we try to attain favor from God, then we can boast because we earned it. And so God's gift is not earned, but given freely. So grace means unmerited favor. So modern day Santa Claus of being good and you get the gift goes against the grain of whether you're good or bad. If you seek me and believe in me and surrender to me, I will give you my grace. So I think that's where I would want to clarify. Even for my kids, as they grow up, they'll have questions. And I'm not going to bash Santa Claus. I have no personal problems with that, but I would want them to clearly have a healthy understanding. Giving of gift is good, but with God, it's not based on a performance, but it's all on grace, right? It's a free gift that He gives us. So because of that, you give, and you love, and you respect, and you have gratitude, right? So that's where I want to clarify for the churches and for our children. Yeah.
On that theme
Yeah.
of self-reflection, Santa will reward us if you're good or bad. Near the end of the year, this holiday season, we reflect on 2013. And what are some tips or advice you'd say that is the best way to evaluate on whether the year was good and how we could become better as we create New Year's resolutions?
I don't know, from how I do it, there's a checklist of things you did and you said you wanted to do or accomplish, or how you wanted to live your life, and then you sort of go through. So did I do this? Did I do this? Did I do this well? Could this be better? Or was this just a total failure? And sort of you reflect on saying, what went wrong? Why did this year not happen the way it's supposed to be, and things like that. And then it's almost like a list again. You make another, that's how I do it anyways, another list of what I want to do in 2014, and you sort of reflect of how to do it better.
In that time period, how does, one aspect is to look at it through goals and accomplishments. In terms of our personal character and personality, how would you recommend people to evaluate or create their New Year's resolutions?
One of the things that, when I've been consistent with it, is journaling. As I worked through things, even in my own life. But I think I asked a question, Tuesday night we'll have a New Year's Eve vigil service at our church, and one of the questions we ask is, how has our life changed since last year? And what are things that God has revealed in our lives? What are things that we have surrendered to God? How have we grown? How has my character and my life been shaped by the love of God? And how has just loving God and joyfulness increased in our homes and in our families? The other thing is, what do I use to examine my life, right? Like, what are the standards that I use? But so Jesus says, examine your heart, examine your life to see whether, for example, you're in the faith. And secondly, if you're loving God and if you're loving the people, right? And so those are things I have to ask myself. Lord, do I love you now? Are you number one in my life, right? And so following those things help me. And I know when I fall short, then, I go to God in forgiveness. And I ask him. But the other thing that helps me also is having a few people around me who keep me accountable and say, hey, follow up with me. Or I'll call them and say, and these are spiritual mentors in my life, and they say, hey, look, can we talk about this? Here are things I wanted to do, but I've been struggling to uphold them.
So, on that note, Sammy, what are your thoughts in 2014? Do you make resolutions?
I definitely do, and I don't think it's just New Year's. New Year's is a great time to start, but like there are sometimes I've started resolutions in September, for example, and like one of the things that I always see that the most common resolution for people is to go to the gym, because in January you'll see that you can't get a machine, like you have to wait like 20 minutes, and like that's my resolution this year too, actually.
And did you have that same resolution previously?
I had it a few years ago.
And then what happened in terms of making it into a habit?
So you follow it, and like I think they say you have to do something 27 times or something like that to make it to make it a habit, rather than just like into your routine. And what happens is eventually life gets in the way. So you'll do something, and the moment you first drop it, you can't get back on it. It's really, really tough. And so one of the things I would suggest to people is, if you're serious about something, make sure that you have somebody, like you said, like accountable, who will make sure that you follow through with it.
Arista, what are your resolutions?
It's always going to be the gym every year. No, I just wanted to sort of get back into the servicing aspect of it. I used to do a lot of volunteering, servicing, community, things like that. As time went on and life went on, I've stopped doing those things, or really cut back. This year coming up, I want to focus on sort of some international things.
And how do you think you'll balance that? Because you already have existing duties as a businessman and as a father.
I have to. Like I put it, what I mean? If I do A, B, C, D is this. It's one of those things. It's going to be a month that I set aside to do, or one day in a month, do something with the family. I've sort of put together like a priority. You can do business and things like that, but there'll always be business, and clients can wait one day. You know what I mean? So maybe the whole day of the Sabbath, they were supposed to rest and do those things instead of working and thinking about work. Maybe I should do something else.
And in terms of, generally in late January, early February is when people start to face struggle with their resolutions. beyond the journaling and having mentors and helpers, what are those other tips that individuals can use to keep their resolutions going through?
I mean, I know this sometimes sounds too simple, but prayer every day. Start off the morning on my knees praying, and that's a way of surrendering. Jesus calls us to surrender. And I think we talked about prioritizing, and sometimes you have to maybe put that on the fridge, keep that on the phone. But these are simple things, and ultimately, here's the thing: when I feel I'm really weak, I'm unable to do this, I need to remember who's my strength. I'm drawing my strength from the Lord, and the Spirit is helping me move forward. Because God says, don't lean on your own strength. And so prayer, these are spiritual principles that we remember and exercises that we take. And then there's that community around us who holds us accountable and helps us move forward. But those are the essentials, the bread and butter of daily living.
For some would say 2013 was a tough year. There was a lot going on with the ice storm, in our country, a lot of
natural disasters,
scandals and natural disasters. What do you think 2014 has in store for people, or at least broadly speaking, what hopes are there, do you think, or ideas?
I think natural disasters, that just seems to be getting bigger every year. So I think there's going to be some things going on. I think a lot of people will be trying to focus more with family. In my story, at least, there's been so many deaths this year of just sicknesses, of healthy people, not old age death, just random sicknesses, cancer. So I think doing more of the family thing, hanging out with spending more time with the family, or the people you love, or the friends that you only see at funerals. I really want to focus on seeing them without seeing them at funerals and things like that. So.
Sammy?
I kind of agree with that. I found that a lot of people I know have gotten sick this past year, and I know it's all about family, but at the same time, it's all about like in my family, for example, me, I'm trying to grow my career. I'm I have my own things that I want to do for 2014. And I know in the world, there'll be always improving technology and seeing where we can go with that, and hopefully improvements in medicine to deal with some of these diseases. But I think it's a positive. I think every year that passes by, medical innovation is always improving. Technology is always improving too. So.
Yeah, for people who've had a tough year, there have been a lot of quite a deaths. Every year there's deaths, and this past year in particular, I've noticed as well, sickness. There's a saying that hope springs eternal, but some people do find it hard to find hope. And how do you create hope going into a new year?
For example, last year in our church, we two of our oldest members passed away, and one was in his 90s, one was in his 80s, and it was a big loss for us. But how we were comforted was looking at the promises of God when He says, do not mourn as though we have no hope. For God says He will come and receive all of us one day, both those who have died and those who are alive when He comes back. So as we move into the new year, one thing for certain is we're a year closer. Jesus says I'm going to come back. So either I believe that or I don't, and I believe it with all my life, that one day He'll come back. And He says suffering will exist until the end. And so we have developments, we have technology, we have all of these things that help us, but they will never fully alleviate. That's what God is saying. And that one day it'll all come to an end. But until then, that we keep our hope fixed on Him. So I tell my wife, for example, if something is to happen to me tomorrow, we ultimately know that we have that hope in Him. And that is what gives us ultimate comfort, even in the moment of mourning and darkness, that God is sovereign over every problem, and that He's here to comfort us. And He calls us to comfort one another as a community, ultimately.
This time of the year, many people make predictions for 2014. Are there any predictions or ideas of what will happen?
I'll get more gray hair. No, just for prediction-wise, I'm not too much into the predicting. I'm hoping a better year for everybody. That's pretty much it, and myself, and maybe sort of let go of some of the stuff that were holding me back last year. My prediction is just to cut those things and go with the positive things in life.
Well, and on that note, if there are any last thoughts before we wrap up on how to, perhaps best wishes from you guys?
I guess just we're talking about the season, and ultimately, Jesus came to be in a relationship with us. And it's hard to have a relationship with anybody when our lives are so busy, when we're unable to sit down and get to know one another. And my prayer and encouragement is allow the Lord to talk to you, allow Him to explain His good news to you so that relationship can be restored.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time for coming on today's show. Dear viewers, as always, our show hopes to help our community plant deeper roots in Canada. We create and we recreate our Tamil Canadian society. It is important that we better and further understand our past, present, and future. I hope today's show helped shed some light on that. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Parthi Kandaval. Have a good week.
தமிழரின் பிம்பம் உங்கள் டிவி.